Okay, so now that these technical things are out of the way, so basically the same people from the previous session, but so I guess I don't need to reintroduce the event, Type Around the Clock, but just briefly, it's a worldwide event. We started in Asia Pacific with 3 sessions. We're going on now in Europe and UK with 3 more sessions. And so we just had a very interesting session with Jerry Gilpin and Josh Leach. And now we are about to have another one with Stephen, and we will have yet another one later in the afternoon. And then we will pass the baton on to the Americas. So for those who don't know me, I am Lionel Ancelet. Maybe I should update my name in the box here. So you have my name here. I'm the president of AFTP, which is the French-speaking type association, so Association francophone des types psychologiques. We have members mostly in France, but also in other French-speaking countries like Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, and a French-speaking part of Africa, like we have members in Senegal, for example, and Cameroon, I think. And so we put in place this worldwide event with the other associations from Australia, Japan, UK, and the US. And today we are very happy to welcome Stephen Launay, who will host the next session. So Stephen's initial training was in mechanical engineering, which proves once again that when you train as an engineer, you can do basically anything in life after that. But I speak as an engineer, so I'm a bit partial. But what happened is during his engineering classes, he got a class on Jungian typology, and something clicked in his mind. And so initially he was just curious about it. But then he started, as most of us, I guess, digging deeper and deeper. And so this investigation, had him discovering things about personality, identity, and also that sometimes when you discover type, you tend to like it so much that you put a label on yourself, and that's not always the best way to use it. And so that's, I think, what he's going to talk about today. Stephen is based in Paris, and so he could have done the presentation in French, but since he's fluent and I think he's binational, he can also do it in English. So we will get a wider audience, but you can use the translated caption. You can activate the captions, and if you're not too comfortable with English, you can ask Zoom to translate it to French or any other language. And so Stephen is going to talk to us about how a model can clarify your pattern without turning it into just a label and reduce your identity to a label. When Stephen doesn't do typology, he actually he designs and lead workshops for professionals in companies large and small on soft skills. Talking about leadership, communication, management, teamwork, all the things where, as you know, typology is very useful. He's of course certified in MBTI and also in DISC. Also, he's trained in psychometrics, and he underwent 5 years of Jungian analysis, which helped him in his deep diving into personality. So I think I will stop for now and leave the floor to Stephen. So welcome, Stephen, and we are really eager to listen to what you have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Lionel, for the introduction. I'm pleased to see you all today. So, as you said, Lionel, I'm going to talk about how all models are wrong. And I suggest we go straight into business. So, I'll start sharing my screen. Just let me know if you do see it properly. Yeah? Okay, wonderful. Okay, still okay like that? Yeah?
Yeah, we see a white, like white square, big white square. Is that what
Yeah,
we're supposed to
it's
see?
all good. I want to say that all models are wrong. But that's not all of the quote. The quote says all models are wrong. Some are useful. And this quote is actually from George Box. So I'm sorry, I'm not here starting with Young. I'm actually starting with someone else. who is a British statistician. And basically, what he says is a model is just an approximation that helps us understand something on a theoretical point of view. But in the end, it's not the exact image of what the world is. And today, we want to talk about different models. Of course, we're going to talk about Jungian types, but it's not the only model that I want to talk about today. So the first question I'd like to ask you all is what other models do you use, either for work or for leisure, when it comes to understanding personality in general? So you can give me answers in the chat. So the Enneagram. Okay, we'll talk about the Enneagram today. The disc. Okay, interaction style. Great. Stereotypes and horoscopes. Yeah, why not? The temperaments from Kersey. Yeah. Um, SPTI. I don't know this one. Sostronics, we will discuss just a little bit about it as well. Okay, so I love the fact that you all actually use a blend of different models. And that's also what I do because I think just one model is not enough to really show a personality. So from there, today when I talk about all models being wrong, there's actually three things I'd like to share with you that I think depicts how models are wrong. And these are the dopaminergic pathways, meditation, and the snake game. And they all have something in common. What they have in common is that they show this tension between a map and a territory. So the dopaminergic pathways is one map to chart how our mind functions, how we can get skewed towards different behaviors. Meditation is just the territory, is really what's happening inside of our body, inside of our mind. We're not looking at it theoretically. We're just looking at what is my mind doing. Now, what about the snake game? The snake game is actually a tip that a fellow co-meditator told me that really helped me increase my meditation to another level. And it has something even, I'd say, transcendent to it. As this metaphor of the snake that he shared with me really felt to me as if it was the transcendent function. So my goal today is to share with you my personal experience when it comes to seeing the differences between the map and the territory and what we can do to merge them together. Through this lens, one thing I'm going to share with you is also some stages of alchemy, which are from Jung. So Jung actually has another stage on top of it, which is Citrinitas, which we will also discuss. And they are the four stages of transformation. Now, talking about these, um, okay, talking about this, I want to tell you about my first encounter with the unconscious. So, as you said, Lionel, when I got out of engineering school, as soon as I got my diploma, I wanted to make my own business about psychological types. And I was not too fond of how the MBTI brand did it because I felt it was not close enough to Jung's theory. And I had this moment of a really big inflation of the ego, thinking that I could change the business, even though I was just 23 years old. And I figured that I could make a business where I could help people to really see different functions happening inside of them. And so I initially wanted to become a coach and a trainer. And so I met a lot of coaches to ask how they did it. How did they get there? And the best tip they gave me is if you want to coach people, the first step is to actually be coached yourself. And that was so true because I remember one meeting where I was with lots of different coaches and we're all discussing together. And I remember seeing some coaches, and my honest reaction was, I do not want to be near this person. I do not want to trust this person to coach me. And I really felt like this person needed to be coached. Of course, the other person, not myself. Regardless, I still decided to start a Jungian analysis. And this Jungian analysis was quite interesting because in the first 6 months, I got there with my curiosity of psychological types. And all I wanted was to map out the different complexes, different archetypes better with my type, using also John Beebe's model. And so it was just all out of intellectual curiosity. And that happened for 6 months, just talking about theory, etc. Until at some point, my therapist asked me a question about my past. And it was really a basic question. He simply asked me something about my family, how I was raised when I was a kid. And as soon as he told me the question, I knew I had the answer. Like it was a simple question. I knew I had the answer. But the answer would not come out. It would not appear in my mind. And 1 second after that, I immediately forgot what the question was. And that's the moment where I realized, okay, this is the unconscious. The unconscious is at play right here. And it's telling me this is a soft spot and I don't want to go there. Now, it was really a shock to me because I had been spending the past 3 or 4 years reading a lot about self-help. And I thought that I was quite self-aware, but I was just stuck into maps and not looking at the actual territory of what was happening inside of me. So, the actual first step when it comes to the alchemical reaction is the raw material. And for me, this primary material really was my identity at that time. So I'll tell you more about how I identified myself. Um, First up, I perceived ENFPs as being really outgoing people, very fun, very nice to be around, lots of crazy ideas. And I pictured INFPs as the quiet nerd, reading books and not connecting with people around them. Plus, as I was very curious, also learned about the Big Five. And on the Big Five, it basically tells us that being an extrovert is good. So, when I took the test, what happened? Well, I mistyped myself. I thought I was ENFP because it made more sense. It made more sense that I was an ENFP because I guess maybe it was just the persona, but I wanted to be an ENFP. I wanted to be outgoing. I wanted to see people. And also in my family, I was raised by two people who were also extroverts, an ESTJ dad and an ESFJ mom. So it was lots of extroversion. So I felt I was an extrovert. Of course, I kept seeing people getting mistyped, and I thought that my business could change that. Yeah, that's tough knowing that I actually mistyped myself. Now, the thing is, I did not mistype myself just once because I also perceived on the Enneagram type 8s to be, the real badass, like the good guy, the awesome guy, where I saw the type 3 being kind of like some type nerd-ish, being superficial, wanting to be seen, and not being themselves. And so, of course, I saw myself as a type 8. I thought I'm a badass. Yeah. No, I'm not. What I really am is someone who wants to perform because I was raised that way. And so I actually mistyped myself not only on MBTI, but also on the Enneagram. Now, luckily enough, when I mistyped myself on the MBTI, it was between ENFP and INFP, so the difference is not huge. And so I did work on my functions, but in a way that was still okay-ish. For the Enneagram, it wasn't as good because I thought that I was strong, and I realized that I was not as strong as I thought I would. Type 8s are very resilient. They don't need help. They don't want it. They can just do everything by themselves. And when I tried making my own business, I was just stuck in fear. I was so afraid of what I would produce would not match with the people's needs. I was so afraid of trying to give a training session and that people would tell me that it's bad, that I really got stuck and gave very little trainings during this period. Because yeah, sorry, I think I missed one element. As soon as I got my diploma, so I worked for a year and a half as an independent trainer on MBTI types. And I gave some trainings, but not nearly as many as I wanted because I was stuck with this fear. And the fear is the main driver of the NEA Type 3. Now, I'm also an engineer, as Lionel said, and I mean, I love maps. I love when I can have a theory, when I can have a model that really represents the world. And I absolutely loved what Dario Nardi did with his work. So he's actually going to present later on today. And so this picture was in 2019. So it was actually my first step into the IFTP, or Association About Psychological Types. That's what got me into it. And so we did this brain scan. So I wanted to use science to look at what the territory really said. Here's the actual brain scan that I had. So you can see it's really relating to the parts behind the brain and also have some parts like, for instance, the F8 and F4, which are the two links on the top right. They really relate to the FI function, which is my values, and also linked with F4 being more how do I understand things as models. Um, T5 is about feeling embarrassed, so the bottom left. O2 is also about recognizing faces. And that's really what I was into, like listening to people, feeling them. T4 is emotional hearing. So if you look at my brain scan, it's quite obvious that it's an INFP scan. And I compared it to what ENFP scans look like. And you can see there's at least one common thread is that, or two common threads, is that the front parts of the brain are very active, which is common if you're an extrovert. Mine were not that active. Now, the second thing is both of these models of ENFPs have this star-like burst in coming from the center. And that's the NE at play. That's the brainstorming part. My NE was not my first function. It's second. But I wanted to see myself in a way that was more flattering. So I thought I was an ENFP. Now, the thing is, people kept telling me, It's weird that you listen so much to people. And it kind of feels like you're an INFP. But I would always find an example to say, no, I'm actually an ENFP. And that's where I believe the Negredo starts began. So that's when things started slipping through the cracks. That's the example of the session in therapy where I saw my unconscious. I saw my unconscious also on a different exercise. So during that time, when I started to create my business, I saw a lot of coaches because I wanted to see what the practices were. And I remember following a training on creating one's vision. What's my vision? What's my dream job? What does it look like to me? And what was great about this exercise is that we had to draw it. It was not about saying it out loud, it was about drawing it. And doing this exercise kind of brought me out of being too conscious and more living the moment. And what I drew as my dream job was this, more or less. I mean, it's not this drawing because my drawing skills are definitely not as good, but it was me on the stage with an audience and the spotlight on myself. And that is not very any type 8. Not very any type 8 at all. That's 100% the type 3 here saying, I want to be on the stage. I am my persona and I want to be seen. But I did not allow this part of me to express itself because I felt shame around it. I felt shame around the fact that I was not sticking to my core identity. And with as someone with an FI dominant function, my identity is essential. And it felt wrong to be looking at what others' gaze on me would be instead of looking at what was actually coming from inside. So if this is the persona that I wanted, behind that persona, there's actually a guy with a very soft spot, very tender, who loves to watch romantic movies and cry. Like it's really something that I love doing. No, I'm a man and I was born in 94. So I'm 32 today. And back even when I was 25-ish, were still not allowed to cry. And as a type 3, as a type 3 and men in today's society, I'm not allowed to cry. So this was only happening behind the scenes. And nobody would actually see me cry. I was even someone who would get into fights really often when I was back in school. So that's why I identified myself as a type 8. So I was hiding behind this persona, and between this persona and the inflation of the ego, I wanted to be someone great. And what else to do than to follow the trend of self-help? Yeah, I fell down into this rabbit hole. I'm curious to know, in your opinion, how do you see the self-help industry today? Before I tell you more about how I lived it, I really would like to have your input on what the self-help industry is. Maybe its pros and cons, and what's your take?
I'll kick off with. I think industry is an interesting word in this context because it does imply that a lot of it is churning out some sort of product which may not fit everybody
Yeah.
and is done for a profit, which is nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it does have a certain feel to it.
Yeah, I think it's about profit, and I think the product is ourself. And I want it to be the best product. And I think that many people who fall into this self-help industry trap see themselves as a product they need to optimize instead of actually expressing who they really are, like and what's underneath. Anyone else wants to share their experience with the self-help industry? And you can write it down in the chat as well. I'm really curious to see what's your take on it.
I think that it's also encouraging, assuming that we can find a solution to everything. And it's very much focused on the self as opposed to reaching out to others or, it's encouraging us to be very individualistic, which I think is probably one of the biggest problems we've got with modern cultures is I find the solution. I read this book and then somehow I find this solution as opposed to I need help from others or I need to somehow work through others. And I think self-help suggests, we can do this alone, whereas maybe we can't, and maybe we need others, and that perhaps needs reinforcing in some way.
Hmm. I love what you just shared here, Shirley. I think you're absolutely right in the way that we we can't really confront our unconscious by ourselves. I think we need a mirror. We need to interact with other people to see what's behind it, and also to relate on the fact that it turns us into individualistic people. I think it does miss half the equation of what individuation is. Because if I would share with you how I understand individuation, how I feel it, it's both, yes, being who you are and becoming more of who you are, but it's also to be this within a context, within a system, and to help the system. And the system is just the rest of humanity. So it's not just about me, it's not just about the others, it's how do both of them can find a middle ground where we can express who we are in a way that actually does serve others.
I think if you look at any, I mean, there are lots of sort of programs, aren't they? Like, I don't know, various sort of self-help, or not even self-help programs that actually don't reinforce self-help, but talk about, things like, I don't know, for AA, for example, being a program that literally it requires the input of other people, and that as we're looking at parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at, the shadow and so on, that we actually need to peel that like an onion, many, many layers, and that we're naturally going to want to look at the things that, improving means we're already conscious of them anyway. If we're not conscious of them, then how can we actually look at them? Do we want to shine light on those things? And we will probably choose not to shine light on them. So we're cherry picking anyway, based on our own personalities. So I think self-help is fundamentally flawed, quite frankly.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing, Shirley. And I think most of us here have a very similar standpoint to yours, where we do think that help is important to become who we are, but it's not just through ourselves, it's through connecting with other people. So I'm not a professional when it comes to self-help. I do want to share my personal experience on it. And so going back to when I had this moment where I really dove deep into self-help, I I did a couple things. So I saw myself as ENFP, so I figured I'm going to work on my TE and my SI. But without keeping the tension with my FI and my NE, meaning that I focused entirely on developing these two other parts of my personality. And what that meant, if some of you read the book Miracle Morning, it suggests a routine where you wake up at 5:30 and then you do different rituals like meditation, visualization, positive affirmations, writing, reading, being as productive as we can. And I had a really crazy routine where I would wake up at 5:30 every morning, do this for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. Um, but I did not live beside it. Like my life was just self-improvement and work, and I would not spend any time seeing friends, connecting with other people. And I literally heard some of my friends that I would see here and there tell me that I was going too far or that they were actually worried for me, worried about how I was not being my own self anymore. And I was forcing these rigid routines, focusing on SI and focusing on having a very strong discipline with my TE. Now, the thing is, this did not lead anywhere. And as an Enya Type 3, I was terrified of failing. And I think the greatest gift that I had at that moment was COVID. COVID happened after a year and a half of me trying to build my company. And that's when I acknowledged that I just can't do it. And I actually thanked COVID because it was not my fault anymore. It's not that I had failed, it's just the system made it impossible for me to succeed, which was an easy way out. So there were some insights that came after these, I would say honestly, quite dark times. I was, as I was trying to dive deeper into self-awareness, so therapy started helping me. Especially as my therapist did not want me to look at my personality through the psychological types. He wanted to look at my life as what happened. Where was I coming from? My environment, my context. So not looking no longer at a map, but at the actual territory. Likewise, another tip that I had at that time was to use meditation. So I did my first meditation retreat with Vipassana, which I initially hated. So I'm going to discuss quickly what Vipassana is because it's quite a unique experience. It's a 10-day meditation retreat. And in that practice, you wake up at 4, you start meditating at 4:30, and from 4:30 to 9:30, you basically do nothing else than meditate, eat, and maybe do your laundry. The program is 10 hours per day of meditation, and you're not allowed to do anything else. You can't talk, you can't write, you can't read. Of course, you don't have a cell phone, you can't listen to music. You're just here, aware in the present moment, listening to what's going on in your body and also in your mind. And you're sitting like that for long stretches at a time. And I can tell you that my butt was really sore. And it was not a nice experience. Like you're feeling sore, you're feeling exhausted, you're also feeling bored, like so bored. And there are speeches every evening that lay out a part of the map that is supposed to match with the territory that we've seen during that day. And I did not really abide by it. So it was really nested in Buddhism, and it talks about reincarnation, which I do not believe in. It also talked about a concept called sankharas, which are manifestations of impurities in our mind that will manifest through physical pain. And even though I do believe in psychosomatic diseases, I did not see it in this meditation practice. They also said that it was supposed to bring many benefits, and from my understanding, they were forgetting the fact that dopamine itself can evolve with time, and you can lower your threshold or your sensitivity to dopamine, or I mean, lower your threshold and heighten your sensitivity to dopamine. And if you spend 10 days doing nothing else than meditating, then as soon as you go out, everything is super stimulating. So he said the benefits came just from meditation. It felt wrong to me. And I stopped. So I did this retreat, and for 2 years straight, I did not meditate at all, did not want to go back. It just felt wrong. But something got me back into my body. I love rock climbing. It's a sport that I really enjoy. And in 2024, I was climbing a cliff. I was in a somewhat similar position as this one. And as I was climbing this cliff, one muscle that I was using here, called the hamstring, I pulled so hard on it that the 3 muscles of my hamstring on my left leg detached from my bone. So from my hip bone, the muscle was no longer attached. I had to do a quite gruesome surgery where they had to drill holes back into my bone to attach the tendons again. I do have pictures, but I'm not showing them here because it's quite gruesome. Plus, it's obviously on my butt, so I don't want this to be R-rated. And the consequence of that is for 3 months, I lost all autonomy. I was not capable of walking. I was not capable of putting a sock by myself. I was not capable of taking a shower by myself. And I was just back in my body, constantly brought back to the pain that I was feeling. And I actually look back at that moment being thankful because it taught me 2 things. One of them is I got injured because I was overworking myself. I was overworking myself in my current job. I was not paying close attention to my body. I had really too high stress levels. And I think that's why I got injured. And I realized that I had to listen to myself as well. I got to pay attention to my stress levels. And I also have to pay attention to the future. So one thing that happened is that I finally decided to do some investments because up until there I was just living on the day to day. And I figured even though I'm just 30, I do want to retire someday. So that's when I started to invest um, in housing. So I started my investment after this operation, which was quite fast, I believe, for an INFP, because I used to just think, there's a saying in French, you can live off of fresh water and love. And that's really how I like to live life. So this injury brought me back to the real world. And it also told me, what if I can go back to meditation? I actually forgot to say something. 6 months before I got injured, I stopped the analysis with my Jungian analyst because it just did not feel right anymore. And right after the injury, I started a new analysis with someone else, and I got back to meditation. So what happened then? I absolutely loved the meditation that time. And I think there are a couple of reasons for it. One of them is I also had a new map that I could use. That map is a book. I actually don't know if it's translated in English. I hope it is, because it's from a French author, and it's absolutely great. And it gives you a map on what your dopaminergic pathways function. And basically, what he says is that there are 5 main dopaminergic drivers inside of us. And these are inside of all living beings that have a central nervous system, meaning a brain. All humans have a desire for reproduction, for food, for power, for exploration or curiosity. And we all also have a drive for laziness. And he says these 5 drivers are hardwired in our mind. Now, how this actually manifested itself in this meditation retreat is I realized, so because I was always surprised, why is it that there are things that I would like to do, but I just can't get myself to do them? For instance, when it comes to something as simple as doing the dishes, like I'm done eating, and I know that I should do the dishes, obviously. And the thought comes in my mind, but I'm an INFP, so I don't have the very strong TE telling me, sure, go ahead and do it. The first thing that comes to my mind is the picture of having to do the dishes. And it feels exhausting. I just don't want to do it. And I see this image in my mind of just, how about I just stay here in my couch just a couple minutes longer. But what we were doing in meditation is being aware of what's happening in our minds. And I realized that all of these different drivers, whenever they came in, they came with an image. Whenever I started having a craving for hunger, well, I would actually see images in my mind of food, or I would see myself eating food. And then I would go on this rabbit hole of what can I cook? What could feel good? Or what restaurant can I go to? But the learning from this meditation retreat is you cannot crave something that you don't think about. And if you let go thinking of something, then you can no longer crave it. And I experienced this during this meditation retreat with these 5 different drivers. And for instance, nowadays, let's say that I have to do the dishes, but I'm feeling lazy. I see the image in my mind of doing the dishes and I don't want to do it. But I know that when I'm doing the dishes, I don't mind. Like literally, when I'm doing the dishes, I don't care. Like it's okay. It's the thought of doing them that is painful. And if I look at the thought and go back to my body, I can then let go of this image. And then I get up and I feel fine. And I start doing the dishes. So meditation was really something that helped me tremendously when it comes to managing different impulses based on these five dopaminergic drivers. And in this book from Sébastien Boller, the subtitle being Why Our Brain Encourages Us to Destroy the Planet and Why We Can't Stop Ourselves from Doing So. He suggests a solution, and one solution that he suggests is meditation. Now, I want to go deeper in meditation because as an INFP, I've been in my mind a lot. I've always been thinking of stuff, thinking of systems, plus I'm an engineer, so I love to think how things function instead of actually living them. And I want to share one experience during this last meditation retreat that really blew my mind. So you have 9 days where you're just meditating, focusing on your bodily sensations, and you can't talk to people. Like not allowed to, just being by yourself and focusing on your bodily sensations. And on the 10th day, you can speak again. And so I know that after the 9th day comes the moment where you're free. You're free to speak again, even though you do have to meditate. You can connect with people. And on the night of my 9th to the 10th day, I had an amazing dream. And I really want to bring it here because the way it's laid out, if you look at it with Jungian images, I mean, as I woke up, I was mind blown how obvious it was. So the dream starts, I'm in my parents' home, and I'm throwing a tantrum. I'm rolling down on the floor, and my dad is here. And then there are two guys that come in. And I know that these two guys used to bully me, but I've somehow managed to befriend them. And so I'm on the couch talking to one of them, and it's this guy who's really overweight. And we're talking, and under him, there's a pack of cookies. I grab the pack of cookies, and he just like gobbles them up immediately. And I suddenly decide to ask him, "Who are you?" Because I know that the images in our dreams represent part of ourselves. I wanted to know, who are you? And I asked this overweight man, and he tells me, I am hunger. It relates directly to one of these drivers that I've seen. He tells me, I'm hunger. Okay. And I ask him, is he going to be with me? Is he going to stay? And in a way that is oddly reassuring, he tells me, I will be with you forever. And I feel good when he tells me that. I feel reassured. Now we look at the second figure, which is a tall man looking outside the window towards the yard. And I go meet him and I ask the same question, who are you? And he tells me, I am greed. And I ask him, what is he going to do? And instead, he brings me outside. And so we go outside, we walk in the yard, we go to the far extremity of the yard, and he puts some kind of pill in my mouth. And it's a bit tough to swallow. And while doing so, he tells me, you are the sovereign of this territory. This territory is yours. You're the king of it. And I feel crowned at that moment. Suddenly, he disappears, and I walk back towards the house. And on the edge of the house, there's a mirror. Now I look at the mirror, and what do I see? I see a man my size with a dark cape, so dark that I can't even see the face, but really dressed in this really, really dark cape, the hood, everything kind of gothic style. And I get really close to the mirror, look at it, and I decide to look at what is the face behind this hood. And I remove my own hood, and I see myself. And I see myself staring back at me. And all of a sudden, I feel so lightweight. I feel so lightweight that I start climbing the house, and it's almost as if I'm levitating. And I just keep climbing, climbing, and at that point, I'm almost flying, and I'm flying across the whole neighborhood. And then I'm flying so far that I feel like I'm then in like over the Grand Canyon, over this really big stretches of land, and I'm playing around, flying, and then I tell myself it's fun, but I'm aware of what's happening, and I actually want to go back to life. I want to live it. And I decide actively at this moment in my dream to snap out of it and to wake up. So that's the dream, and I was baffled by the images inside this dream because I've never had dreams where the images were so clearly cut. It almost felt like it was a cartoon on how obvious like the shadow figure was. What I really loved about this dream is that it does not end here. It's the 10th day. And for the first time during this retreat, so it's actually my fourth retreat that I did. It was only back in February. And during this retreat, I decided to not push myself too hard. And instead of trying to do always the 10 hours of meditation per day, if I felt tired, I would just go back to bed. Say it's okay. I'm not pushing myself. I'm not trying to perform. I'm not trying to be the Steven super meditator. I'm just trying to live it. Trying to let go of this type 3 coming with me. And on this last day, I talk a lot with one of the guy that was here. And we really discuss like really deep into conversations. And at some point, he gives me a tip because he's had 12 meditation retreats. He had some that lasted for 30 days. And I thought that this guy was just spending his time sleeping in bed. He was lying in bed most of the time, but he was actually meditating. And I asked him, how much do you sleep per day? And he told me, I sleep about 2 hours a day. The rest of the time, I'm just meditating. And I noticed that when we were in the meditation hall, when he decided to go to the hall, he could sit for 2 hours straight with no pain, or it seems no pain, and he was just doing it flawlessly without moving. And I thought it was crazy. So I asked him for a tip. And the tip he gave me is the snake metaphor. During Vipassana, the practice that we're told is to focus on our physical sensations. And we scan through the body. And at some point, we're going to encounter a pain somewhere, a pain or maybe a throbbing sensation or very intense itching sensation. And we want to itch it, or we want to move to break free from the sensation. But how he suggested to approach it is to actually picture the awareness as being the snake and have the snake go throughout the whole body. And as soon as pain appeared somewhere, it would be like this apple that the snake had to come and eat. And he'd suggest that I would focus my attention at the area of the pain, but he pictured it as if there were stacked layers of tension on the forehead. And if I focused on releasing the tension that was stacked on my forehead, then I could relax and actually get closer to the pain, to meet it and have it disappear. So I started trying this, and I was capable of sitting for 1 hour straight without moving, which was quite good, but I went to push further, and I had a really hard time going further than that. And on the night of the 10th to the 11th day, as I was lying in bed, I know that the next day we only had like 1 hour 40 of meditation, and then we're free to go. As I was lying in bed, at some point I felt as if there were tears running down my eyes. And I touched my eyes and I couldn't sense anything. There was nothing here. I felt tears, but there was nothing here. So it was kind of odd, but I just figured, you know what, it's okay. Let's just go to sleep. And the next morning, during the meditation retreat, the sitting, so it was 1 hour and 40, and usually we can sit up and get up and move around. And I just felt great. I just felt great. I applied the tip of the snake that the friend told me. And I sat throughout the 1 hour and 40 of meditation without moving and without pain. But that was not all. There was a speech at some point during the meditation retreat, during the meditation sitting. And the speech said at some point, you have to learn to swim in order to swim across the ocean of misery. And I cannot explain what happened here. I only know the territory. I don't know what the map is. But tears started running down my cheeks, but running down like crazy, like full on sobbing, just tears running down. And it felt liberating. It stopped after a couple minutes, and then the sitting continued. And in the 5 last minutes of the sitting, the the speaker also says that we have to learn to share the merits of of the meditation that we do. And once again, at that time, just tears running down my cheeks crazily. And as soon as it was over, I got up and I felt reborn. Now, I cannot explain what happened. I don't know what was the map charted to that territory. What I can tell is I know something has changed in me. And what I want to bring out here is I loved having a map to understand how the world behaved. And sometimes a map really helps. For instance, even a simple map that the friend gave me about the snakes and the stacked layer was what I needed at that time. But what I believe matters most is where are you at this point in time, and what is it that you need? Are you needing more a map, or are you needing more to explore the territory that's around you? So this moment really felt like Citrinitas, which is the moment where the unconscious appeared, and I did not try to hold on to this persona. I was no longer trying to be the meditator that could be perfect. And I just lived through it. And if the tears had to run down my cheeks, then it was fine. And it really created something new. And I believe that was, at least in my experience at that time, a manifestation of the transcendent function. It held two opposites. One opposite being what my NE had gathered up until now, all the understanding of the psyche, all the understanding of the dopaminergic system, of what's in our brain. And I held it with, on the other side, the experience of my body with the sensations that just lived there without trying to explain, but by trying to focus what exactly is happening. Now, this, I believe, then leads to what the rubedo would be then the reddening and the union of the opposites. Now, today, the way I actually approach type is curious to me because I used to look at everything through the lens of psychological types. Whenever I would meet someone, I would immediately try to identify their type and try to understand what's happening inside their mind. Nowadays, I actually took a really big step back from it. And when I meet people, I don't even try anymore. I don't even try, and I don't care. Because what I do instead is engage with them, engage a conversation, meet more people, have conversation, take risks, not be as afraid of making mistakes, and actually live out the territory instead of sticking to a map and trying to draw it more precisely and precisely, even though it's separated and disconnected from reality. So I would like to conclude this with an opening as well, because I know that I talked a lot about meditation, and I would happily answer questions that you have about this. But relating back to Jungian types, I want to share with you that there are still some maps that I can't read. And these two maps are John Beebe's 8-function model. And the other map is the socionic architecture, which also shows 8-function models. And I don't know these maps. If any of you actually know how to read them, I would love to have a conversation around it. Before that, I want to thank you all for listening to this conference, for tuning in, and I would love to answer any questions if you have any.
Hello, here is Pan from Berlin. Thank you very much for your very interesting talk. And I have been to Vipassana meditation twice, one time in Germany, one time in Poland. Yeah, I also can relay some of what you say. Um, I also listen some podcasts about the Vipassana meditation, and it says that there are some potential issue about it. For example, it could discourage it could encourage disassociation inside the body. Yeah, what do you think?
Um, I'm a bit surprised of that it could encourage dissociation from the body because I mean, I can only talk about my own experience, but it really is what got me closer to my body. Like literally, so I actually got back from my last meditation retreat. It was just like a month and a half ago, and I cycle a lot. I cycle to go to work, and I cycle for like 45 minutes. And as I was back from this meditation retreat, instead of having some headphones and listening to music and tuning out of what's happening in my body as I was cycling, I actually started cycling in full awareness and to focus on what's going on in my quads and in my hamstrings, what's going on in my legs as I am cycling. And I felt so much more connected, and I could cycle for 45 minutes with no other stimulation than feeling what's inside of me. So, in my personal experience, it really just got me closer to my introverted sensation.
Okay, thank you. And then I also want to share one thing. I give a MBTI workshop in Berlin, and sometimes I also ask the people about how do you feel about meditation, and I found that there is a very clear percentage split. Say the introvert practice meditation and find it helpful much more than the extrovert. Maybe the percentage is 70% to 30%. So there are also some, type correlated, in from the type perspective.
Yeah. I do see, I mean, I guess, because I don't know, obviously don't know their types, but I really get a clear feel that many people in these Vipassana retreats are INFPs. Like, I feel they're overrepresented in these retreats. And I believe it, at least if I share how it works for me, it's the FI tells me this can allow me to know more of who I am and it answers this desire. And it also allows me to tune in with my third function, introverted sensing, to really know what's going on inside of me. Now, I nonetheless believe that it can really help us rewire our brain. And I think all types can benefit from doing meditation. But I think that if, for instance, you have extroverted sensing as a function in your four stack, then it's not as interesting because the sensations that are happening are only inside. And if you practice well meditation, you can get some really interesting sensations that happen. And it really is interesting as long as you're interested in what's going on in your body. So I think there is a bias for type.
Okay, thank you for your sharing. Yeah.
A pleasure.
Yeah, Stephen, uh, I was listening and thinking like, God, yeah, that's the same for me. I've had the same similar experience from doing like a Vipassana meditation retreat. Um, and it it really felt like extroverted sensing got like sharpened in a way. It was like at first like I really couldn't feel anything, but then over periods of time like started to experience more like tingling and things like that. Um, and I didn't realize how disembodied I was before doing that course, really. And I came back from it, um, starting to notice that like my feelings or things that I thought about as FI, like before then, I would describe emotions as being somewhere around here. But after that, I started to notice that it was really just these like little like grunt feelings that I would have in my body, and then somewhere like a thought would get attached to that thing as it was sort of bubbling up.
Mm.
And yeah, so I just wanted to reflect like
Yeah.
a similar experience here, and it's fascinating seeing another INFP go through the same process, basically.
Thanks so much for tuning in, Josh. And I want to address this part of the emotions when they happen because I think you're 100% right. And actually, so I'm a trainer today. I work for Skills Day. We give trainings on so management, leadership, sales. One of my favorite topics that we don't do as much as I'd love is emotional intelligence. And I absolutely love this topic, and I think meditation helps tremendously for that. Because I believe the first step of emotional intelligence is being aware of the emotions happening in my body, to not act on them, but to have them simply being messengers of what I experienced of life, and from there receiving this emotion as guidance to what should I do with it. And what you're saying about how these emotions are embodied is, I mean, for me, it really seems accurate because when I feel emotion, no matter which one it is, whether it's desire, whether it's hatred, or whether it's anger, I can immediately feel it in my chest.
Mm,
I feel it up in my chest. I feel tension. I feel something. And for let's say, for instance, let's say that I'm driving on my bike and I see a driver that really put me at risk. Like they took a sharp turn, they did not see that I had the priority. My initial impulse would be to get angry and or even yell or badmouth or whatever. Nowadays, whenever this happens, I sense this tension in my chest. And all I do is I acknowledge it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I see this anger. And then I ask myself, what can I do about it? And the thing is, there's nothing that I can do about it. So I choose to let it go. From it's this sentence that I've heard so many times from my mom, which is actually one of the saying from AA. May God grant me the serenity. I don't want to say it because I'm pretty sure I'm going to mess it all out. Does someone want to say it for me just to make sure that it's well said?
it's okay.
To
You can
accept
butcher
the
it.
things I can't
Oh,
change. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alex.
Okay. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change the things I can, and have the difference, and to have the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
nice.
courage to change the things I can.
Yeah, it's the wisdom, the courage, and serenity or something like that. I'm bad with this one. I don't remember
The
it.
wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. Thank you, Shirley. Chris, I noticed that you took your hand out.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share from an introvert's point of view, or my own experience. And that is, firstly, my guru emphasizes stillness in the mind. And what I'm hearing from a type point of view is that when an introvert goes into meditation, extroversion happens. In other words, the mind switches on, the body switches on, and energy starts flowing around, and you become aware of that energy. I put that point of view to you, that you're moving into your extroverted mode inside yourself. And that's where all that's happening for you. Whereas for me, too much meditation, or meditation per se, can drive me bonkers because I'm already an introvert and I'm already managing and I'm already having that easy access to stillness within. And I actually need to go out and do something like weed the garden, go for a walk, have this awareness meditation of the trees in the park, that kind of thing. What's outside of me is where I can get into that sense of stillness and self-awareness and awareness of a greater reality, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much, Chris. I think you're pointing out something very essential here, is that we all have, I mean, we all have different needs to individuate. We all have different energies inside of us that draw us towards what would be growth. And I think what really matters is to find out what is the map or the territory that you need to navigate right now in order to fully integrate who you are. And as an ISTJ, and you have this introverted sensing that you say you can have this stillness inside of you and you can exit immediately. I mean, I'm in awe for that because I know I can't. I know that it takes a lot of effort for me to actually create this stillness. And this stillness helps me because it balances out my extroverted intuition that wants to go left and right all the time. But it's not a magic pill because for me, it brings balance. For you, it's already who you are. So you don't need it as much since it does not balance you out.
It's a balance you have to find for yourself. And then that becomes your self-awareness and your self-definition. So whether you're saying you're a 3 or an 8 Enneagram, or E or I in your NFP, you have to name that for yourself. That's your life journey, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. So anyone else have questions they would like to share with the group? Or reflections as well? Also, if there are any among you who are really nerdy and have some insights about John Beebe's 8-function model or about socionics, I'm all ears. Because they are still, in my experience, very hard to chart with a territory.
My experience with BBs is that it was done by an extrovert and it works very well for an extrovert. But an awful lot of the introverts I know lead with their extroverted auxiliary. I mean, there are people who've known me for 30 years and still swear I'm an ENTJ because they've seen me in line them up, march them out, work mode, right? And I learned to lead with that as a kid. I do it very well, but it's not me. And so, what does that do with your staff? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it does. And I'll also say, as a woman in her 70s who was also an engineer and a real engineer, not a wannabe, uh, who found type and other stuff late. The both F functions are in my shadow. That is just not what IT women want to present. It's the girly stuff that keeps dragging us down. And so that too then, and I think it may be true. I'll ask, for men with feeling preferences, do you also find that sometimes the social stigma for that, the only thing worse than being called a tomboy when I was your age was being called a sissy. So it seems as if that also warps the BB model. And of course, BB's so I guess what I'm saying is there's nurture to it.
Yeah.
And the nurture is different for different types. The Broussard, who did twin studies, once said that he thought nature seeks out nurture, and so that we end up putting ourselves in environments when we're allowed to, that fit a little bit better with our nature. So it snowballs, right?
Yeah. It sounds like a description of individuation to me.
Well, that's not a bad thing.
Indeed. Thanks for sharing, Barbara. Shirley.
Yeah, I'm going to do a bit of a brain dump here, but as an extroverted intuitive, I'm sure you'll accept that. But yeah, on my own sort of personal journey, I've realized that I'm using my sensing function to somehow get in touch with my feelings. And certainly, you talked about, climbing, but also perhaps some of the more, I'm not going to call them monotonous sports because I love doing them, but running, walking, swimming, cycling, they have been ways in which I have been able to much more get out of my head and much more in touch with my body and the reality around me. I used to climb when I was younger as well, interestingly. And so extroverted sensing somehow through that motion, and sometimes for hours before I could actually switch off my brain. But that somehow has enabled me not only to get in touch, the extroverted sensing, but also then to allow myself to actually experience some of my past memories and thoughts, and some of which are quite difficult, quite painful memories, in order that I can begin to allow the feelings in that have been very suppressed. So I'm an ENTP, so very much in my head, very much about analyzing everything to death, going down rabbit holes. So it's been almost at the combination of the sport to sort of process a lot of the somatic elements, in order to be able to get into the detail of some of the past and allow myself to go there in order to then actually exercise some of the feelings. And for me, because feeling function has been a bit of a minefield in many ways, extroverted feeling, because really hard to find the boundaries between like caring for others, being in some sort of collective of some description, including my own family, without actually losing myself, which has been incredibly difficult to navigate for me personally, and all sorts of issues around people pleasing and boundary setting that have got me into deep water over the years. And the other is about, if you go too far in trying to please others, you end up betraying yourself. So almost loss of own values, the introverted feeling function. So I'm in the middle of it all, so I can't really make sense of it, but I'd love your point of view on it if you have one.
So the first thing that came to my mind, Shirley, was an example of one of my colleague who is, I believe, also an INFP. So same profile as me, and in a ways also has introverted sensing, not as high, so very in his head. And he runs really long distances. Like he runs like 100 over 100 kilometers races. So like it means he's running for over 24 hours, sometimes even 36 hours straight on. Or he takes like a tiny break, just like 20 minutes nap, and then gets back on running. So it's very monotonous. And I remember asking him, how is he feeling the moment? And his experience was completely different from yours, where he does not go back in his body. He's actually letting his mind run free and create many ideas. Now, I don't really know what would be best. Um, if I just follow my gut feeling, I think that all the images that come into his mind while he's running are a way to avoid the pain of being confronted with the tediousness of having to run for so long, and is his coping mechanism. but I'm not sure it's as healthy as what you would describe here, where it actually connects you back with your body. And tuning in with this kind of tedious, even sometimes painful part of physical exercise. One thing that many people who did meditation in Vipassana noticed is when they're confronted with this sitting for a long time, the tediousness and the pain of it, they would have memories come out of nowhere about things in the past, and some of them being very painful memories that they allow themselves to let go of through this meditation practice. So from my window, when I hear you talk about your experience of the tediousness of these exercises and the way it actually brings you back to your past and to your feelings, it seems like a very similar experience to what one can get through meditation. No, I'm not sure I answered your question, Shirley. I gave you some thoughts on it, and if you'd like to dive deeper, please go ahead.
Well, first, thank you very much for that, because that's a very insightful lens for me. It's interesting because I've been thinking quite a lot. One of my daughters is studying forensic psychology at master's level, and she's really fascinated about addiction generally. And it's interesting to find the balance, isn't it, between what's healthy and then what becomes unhealthy. And, when we're into coping mechanisms and survival strategies, we're into very unhealthy territory, even though it's helping us to deal with a situation at one particular point in our lives. It then can become into really sort of habitual or compulsive sort of maladaptive behaviors on a longer term basis. So yeah, that's quite interesting what you're saying about sort of excessive sport. When is it healthy? When is it unhealthy? When does it help us to access or process certain things that need processing so we can let go of them and become healthier, happier individuals, or develop ourselves further? Or at what point are we actually even potentially punishing ourselves or doing something that's negative for us? Is a very interesting boundary that's very hard to identify, where that boundary is. So I think you're touching on that as well, which is, am I doing it because I'm actually trying to numb something out here? So excessive sport is obviously one of the things I've used in the past in all sorts of areas, to actually numb the pain and stop the feelings. The other is you can use it in a very productive way to actually process the feelings. And yeah, I don't have no solutions here. I'm still in the middle of it, but it's absolutely fascinating territory. And I would welcome anyone else's thoughts on that, including yours.
Well, thanks for sharing, Shirley. What I would like to share is the book. The book, Le Bug Humain. I don't know if it exists in English or not. Lionel, can I ask you for help on this? And if you can quickly look up on internet if it actually exists in English.
Well, actually, I looked up when you talked about it, and there doesn't seem to be an English version yet.
I'm so sad to learn this.
I can speak French actually, so I'll read it in French if it's in French. If it's in
Yeah.
French, it's no problem.
I really encourage you to do it.
You guys could translate it.
What do you say, Barbara?
You said we could translate it.
Translate
it.
So one thing that I really liked in this book is that he says we humans are highly intelligent, and the more we grew and the more we became intelligent, but in the way the society functions and the way it's always grasping for attention, we're becoming less and less aware. So we're becoming more and more smart, more and more intelligent, but less and less aware. And so we're more behaving like robots or just doing what seems to be right without questioning why are we doing the things we're doing. And relating to this question of awareness, and that's why I love meditation so much, because it helps me feel this awareness, and not just in my mind, really feel it in my chest. I can now tell if what I'm doing is good for me or not. Like if I tune in to my gut feeling, something says, yeah, you should be doing it, or no, you shouldn't be doing it. I actually first encountered this during not meditation, but during therapy with my Jungian analyst, as he was asking me questions and I would answer, and I would feel when I'm providing an answer if what I'm saying is true or if I'm hiding part of the important information, if I'm twisting reality in a way that protects me or takes me away from the shadow. So I really think awareness of what's going on inside of us can be a key to know if it's adaptive or not. Yes, Sue.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. I suspect I might be the only person with a sensing preference on this call. So I'll get a reward for hanging on in there, except there is the ISTJ there, so my apologies. But having listened to a lot of podcasts and discussions on type, bodily awareness is definitely connected to the sensing function. It's either extroverted sensing or it's introverted sensing. It's extroverted sensing, it seems, in the moment. So what you're actually feeling right now, what you're doing right now. And it's introverted sensing when you compare the right now to what it was before. So if you have introverted sensing in, if you're SJs, for example, you're very likely to know when something is off. And you're likely to know that quite quickly because you're comparing your normal body awareness to your past body awareness, which is the introverted sensing part of that understanding your body. But in my experience, talking to people who have a preference for intuiting, both extroverted and introverted, certainly it's part of a human experience to use physical, sport or activity to recover from something. We all do that to a certain extent. For the NPs, I've always found that they really struggle to know when to stop, which is what you're talking about, Shirley. You know when to stop when it's damaging. It's fine until it's damaging. But that need to engage extroverted sensing is something that really, really calms your mind. It stops that NP starburst pinball in a ball in a pinball machine. Sparklers, however you like to put it. There is something about being physically moving that enables you to focus your mind. So my son, who's ENTP, he was a competitive go-karter as a young man, and he used to go round and round and round and round and round and round the same track, hitting the same curves at exactly the same place at exactly the same time. And initially, my knowledge of type made me think, well, what in the world is he doing? Like, have I got his type wrong all this time? Is he actually an ESTP? Is this, I've watched him since he was literally born. So maybe I've got this wrong. But actually what it was slowing extroverted intuiting down to a point that was manageable for him. Equally, the NJs, or the introverted intuiting, they really use extroverted sensing to get their introverted intuiting working. So they'll go running. I need to physically move to actually get myself into a zone space so that introverted intuiting can actually work. And it can be that I've known a yoga teacher who's ESFP who uses yoga to get into that introverted intuiting space. So, that crossover with sensing and intuiting relating to the ability, how you're using your body and how your functions affect you are really interesting. I think they're significantly influential. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you very much, Sue, for the clarification. I really relate to how you described this different functions working, and thinking of your son who has this introverted sensing as then he's ENTP, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So as his inferior function, and I can see why he can be drawn to doing the same circuits again and again and trying to adjust just sometimes by a few centimeters the curve, the way he hits it, as refining this experience and really tuning in to his introverted sensing. And I feel like these are the moments where I enjoy most my rock climbing experience. When I'm working on a project and it's one rock climbing route and I'm doing it again and again, and every time I'm trying to figure out precisely what would be the exact movement I should do, precisely where I should put my fingers, my feet, my hips. And doing it again and again feels great because it allows me to tap into my introverted sensing. And I want to compare this with a friend I climb with who's ESFP, so using this extroverted sensing. And that person does not like doing the same route twice. Like I'm doing it once, I'm engaging in the moment. I either do it and it's great, I either fail and that's life. But if I succeed it, I don't want to do it again. I don't see the point in doing it again because they're disinterested with their introverted sensing. Or at least that's the map that I see on this territory that I observe. Shirley, yeah. Thank you, Sue. Shirley, you want to add something?
Yes, I mean, super fascinated by this and the combination of what you're both saying here, because you know, it's I hear again that sort of not knowing the boundaries. Again, as an ENTP myself, I can totally resonate with Sue's son, and the desire to want to get it better and better and better. But for me, as an ENTP, is where is the boundary? There isn't. The risk is there is no boundary. It becomes the desire for improvement becomes you know, the aim is perfection, and perfectionism being then obviously a very destructive thing that is absolutely unachievable for human beings. So it's, you know, as an extroverted sensor, I think you'd be enjoying the moment, and no, you don't want to do the same thing twice. You want to go and experience something different, and that seems somehow, well, even that can obviously have its extremes. But for me, it's often about doing it and improving and getting better and better and better because I want to be perfect. And there's this risk of the desire for perfectionism, which is then the addiction. You know, the dopamine hit is coming from faster, better, you know, whatever it might be, which actually there's a point at which that is self-destructive. And I think that maybe that's the point of this book, which is, you know, what made us successful as humans is actually now our destructive mechanism. We can't switch this off. This desire for even more dopamine, which will never be satisfied, is going to be more of everything, whether it be food, whether it be alcohol, whether it be any substance abuse. But it doesn't have to be substances. It could be in relationships, human relationships as a whole, you know, codependency, anonymous as well, if we're looking at all of that range of different associations and so on, as well as power. I mean, look at the world in terms of power. Again, too much of anything is going to be incredibly dangerous. And I can see it in myself with there's always this risk of people pleasing and perfectionism because I don't know where the boundaries are.
Thank you so much for sharing, Shirley. So we're 5 minutes until 2. I don't know if Lionel, you want to give a closing word to this training or conference?
Well, actually, the plan is to leave the session open for, I mean, at least for a while, because the next session is not until 1 hour from now, so we can leave it open and continue the discussion in an informal way. And then in some time, I will paste the link for the next session in the chat, and we can all jump to the next session where we will meet Sue again.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Janelle. So, anyone wants to share some thoughts, or we can also go to another topic than what was discussed in the conference.
I guess probably I can just make a comment, Stephen, about your remarks on John Beebe. I think John Beebe has been helpful to a lot of people. And I think sometimes there's just there's one model that just really, really fits and suits, and it's just like hand in glove, and you go, wow, yes, that's me. And then other people can read exactly the same thing, and then you just think, oh, you know, this is not quite so comfortable. I was definitely like that with Enneagrams. I mean, it took me 3 sort of weekends of going on courses to try and work. You know, I literally eliminated about 4 numbers. I'm still juggling with 5 numbers, and then there came, you know, sexual, social. It took me I just could not work out my Enneagram type until I really found a professional who helped me, and I discovered I'm a 2 social. So and I'm very clear about that now. But oh my goodness, I was like so desperate to find this thing. And it just was elusive. It was like trying to catch a cloud, no matter how much I looked at it. So I don't know anything about socionics. I know, I've done a bit of work with BB, and I just think it does suit some. So if it doesn't suit you, then that's completely fine, because I think everyone's viewing these cognitive processes in very different ways. I have a belief that we do have a core type. Having done various questionnaires and things recently, I've come out as having very strong extroverted feeling. Well, that's supposed to be my demonic BB function, and that doesn't. I've got a personal narrative for it myself as to why that might be, but the cognitive functions are all whirring around. All of them are all whirring around, and I love the quote that I'll probably use in the next session as well. That type is not what you can do. It's not about what you can do. It's about what you can't stop doing. So whatever our type is, what is the function I literally can't stop doing? And so, as a young man, with INFP preferences, you literally cannot stop consulting your introverted feeling. It just, it's like this tuning fork that just bings all the time, and it either resonates or it doesn't resonate. And if it doesn't resonate, then it's like, ouch, this is not good. But, you live with that tuning fork all your life, which is a tuning fork that a lot of people don't even have grasp of. So, I think that's why these cognitive processes are just so fascinating to people is, what's working when, what can I not shut off? What am I expressing? This is often your extroverted function, and what can I not let go of, which is often your introverted function. And for a dominant introverted feeling, you can't let go of an injustice. It's just impossible to let go of it until you've fixed it, sorted it, placed it somewhere, done something with it. But not everybody goes around their world with that inside them. So that, what I love about type is these understandings are just phenomenally helpful when you realize that other people go around with different stuff that is motivating them, helping them, being the reason why they express or why they hold on to things. It's utterly fascinating.
Thank you so much for the way you phrase it. I really see it resonate clearly. What you cannot stop doing, and that is so true. That is so true. And I also think that this relates also to, because I remember reading one book of, it wasn't Jung, it was Fun France, that she co-wrote, I can't remember with whom. And she basically explained that if you want to access your inferior function, you have to let go of your dominant one. And now I don't think we can let go as in completely let go. Like, I mean, I will always have this tuning fork inside of me and I cannot drop it. But I think one path to individuation is to acknowledge, when can I accept that there is injustice and not try to fix it, or at least let go of the feeling that is attached to it, to see what else can emerge.
Yeah. All of our functions are in service to the dominant function, typically speaking. So, my inferior function is introverted feeling. So, the question for me is, how can that help me? How is that helping my dominant function? And how can I let it in to make sure that all of the work that I do with using my extroverted thinking is actually worthy and worthwhile, and does it mean something, and should I be doing this? How can I ask those questions? Otherwise my extroverted thinking just goes rampant and decides to control everything, which is really not helpful. Feels good, but steady on, not got to look after everybody else as well. So yeah, I think, how does each of your function serve the dominant function is such an interesting question, because your dominant function is what it is.
I think that's quite really insightful. My brain's hurting, which means that it's working overtime, which is a sign that my extrovert intuition is in full flow. But for me, also linking back a bit to the whole question of self-help is I think maybe when you overplay your dominant, for me, my dominant function is extrovert intuition. I get stuck because it's the optionality stays open forever. And when optionality is open, there is no way to make choice and move forward. There's no agency. And that's why I'm feeling stuck. I'm generating more and more and more and more possible paths and taking none of them. And it's necessary then for me to switch that off in order that I can go through a process of finding the next step, the path forward. And for me, it's been, it's about awareness, definitely. And obviously, 25 plus years with MBTI and some other tools, but predominantly that has been a way to really understand and become much more aware of what I'm doing well, what's helping and benefiting, and what's actually getting in the way of my own sort of personal development and progress. So awareness is such a key part of it, I think. And, peeling the onion, different lenses, whether it be within MBTI, whether it be other models, it's just another way to take a different lens to get greater self-awareness. Acceptance as well. Because there's no point in focusing on things you actually can't change. So if you're focusing on other people, for example, what a waste of time. You can't change them. You can only change something about yourself. So the focus needs to be the correct focus. And if I bring the combination of that awareness and the acceptance together, rather than constantly asking why, the endless loop that, ENTPs can get into very easily, obsessively as well. And obviously, if we're not able to stop doing something, it can become compulsive and obsessive behavior, hence again, maladaptive. But that combination of awareness and acceptance, if they're in place, that enables you to reduce the optionality and move then into agency. I can then make a choice and do something. And then that just happens so fast then, it's like, I almost look like an ENTJ in that moment. It's like back, everything in a row, decided, move. And but I have to have switched off the dominant, at least for a period of time, and let the other functions in order to get to that point. And it's an interesting juggle almost with my own brain power. I don't know if that makes sense at all. It makes a lot of trying to make sense of it in my own my own life. But I'd be very interested in both of your takes on that, and anybody else who would like to chip in, obviously.
There is a very useful model that Otto Scharmer taught for a while, and it involves micro and mini projects, pilot projects. In other words, what do you mean you're going to go and do the whole thing in 10 seconds and you have to be caught into one of those paths, right? No, it's sort of, I guess it's the SE experiment in the real world. And when I really take that to heart and go, well, what am I doing sitting here in my mind and trying to think only theoretically, experimenting with these, when I could physically do little micro experiments with this little path and a micro experiment with that little path. And particularly as a TJ, to remind myself that just because I said I'm going to try X doesn't mean I'm stuck there. And learning that I can change that. Now, it really annoys your sensing team members when you do that. But the idea of trying those paths in the real world, trying them, not casting them in bronze when you get the perfect one, but trying them the entrepreneurial group talks about it: fail fast and fail often, right? And learn from it. I used to keep a wall with notes on, we're not doing this again. And when we try one of those, people would just pop up and say, okay, another failure. and so it didn't, knowing that it was an experiment also helped in that you didn't feel like you were a failed experiment. You felt like you now knew that path X probably wasn't the way you wanted to go. And I, as an introverted intuitive, normally that gave me probably not path Y and Z and T either, because they're too much like that. So let's try something that has more likelihood, those sorts of things. But I really, I like Otto's work, and I think trying that as a philosophy uh, can, can get you off of dead center sometimes. And I'll also say that the more I experiment with something, the more better ideas I pop up. Actually doing things in the physical world uh, creates a whole lot more ideas. Sometimes that's a bad thing, right? Now I've got 500 instead of 100, but they're probably better ideas in that they're more grounded in that extroverted sensing. Isn't that a horrible thing for us intuitives to say, that that you need to be grounded in extroverted sensing? But it feels right.
Well, I guess that's reality, isn't it? And I think that's absolutely essential. I think one of the things that I work a lot with entrepreneurs in artificial intelligence, and one of the things I've really learned from them that's reinforced again for me is the importance, learning as per se, and how quickly you can learn from mistakes. I mean, we learn most, even as small children, when we think about it, by trying stuff out and making mistakes. And then we just,
Yes.
when a child's learning to walk, they don't get up and walk. There's a lot of falling over and crying, and all sorts of experiences go on between them not being able to walk and them being able to walk. And I think it's certainly in the entrepreneurial space, it's very much about, optimizing how quickly you can learn from the mistakes you make and making lots of those mistakes. So, most entrepreneurs, before they're highly successful, have been very unsuccessful hundreds, if not thousands of times before, with all sorts of experiments that completely bombed out. And they've got no problem with that. I mean, the fear of failure that obviously stops so many people from even trying, which probably 98% of people never try because they're so afraid that it's not going to work out. And we're very much in a success-based world. Everybody
We
measures
teach
everybody else on
children
the
in
success and
school,
results.
right? We absolutely teach children in school you can't experiment and fail. You have to have the right answer every time. And, when I think about that, what a horrible thing to teach a kid.
Plus, it's very limiting because it stops them from trying, and stops because
Well, not only
fear of
that,
failure.
but it stops your ability to question, right? I mean, does anybody here really believe in this day and age that there is one right answer? And yet, in order to graduate from high school in Texas, for example, you had to write down the right answers in the state exit exam, right? So there was a right answer to it, and teachers taught to the tests, not to thinking, not to creativity. A very sad situation, and of course, particularly if you're SJs who think in terms of a constant answer, that's a really bad thing to beat into kids.
Stephen, hi, this is Tom.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the conversation about exercise, and I'm fairly new. Well, I'm not that new to type, but more recently studying it, being aware of it for a long time, wishing I would have been more deeply into it for a long time based on these great conversations. Exercise, I used to run 3 miles a day, 7 miles on Sunday, and my favorite way of running is to run with a partner who would speak the whole time. We would talk and talk and talk and talk. So I had no awareness of any pain, difficulty, etc. during the running would feel seamless and exhilarating. And therefore, I could go 7, 10, whatever number of miles with the feeling of no exertion. Is that something that shows up because of my type? Or can you say something about that with regards to the conversation?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Tom, for sharing. I can also share personal experience because I did a lot of running as well. I started track running when I was 7 years old, and I ran until I was 20. And I would mostly do um, long distances. And at some point, when I was in my engineering studies, I stopped track running, but for here and there, when I really wanted to feel more free during the weekend, I would go for a long run, and I would run what would be a semi-marathon. So I don't know how many miles that is, probably close to um, 8 or 9-ish, maybe more than that.
About 13 miles, maybe?
13, yeah, 13 miles.
Yeah.
And so I would go straight up and run 13 miles without uh, actual preparation. And I ended up injuring my knee. I don't know how it's called in English, but it was the tendon on the side of the knee that, there's this band that comes from the hip and runs down your leg on the outside part. And it can create an inflammation near the knee. And I think this happened because the way I was running was so unaware of what was going on in my body as I ran that I was having a lot of impact on my knees through just the fact that I was running on my heels instead of on the tip of my toes. And thing is, you need to run more towards the tip of the toes because you have the arch of your feet that takes the pressure instead of just falling straight on the heel, and then it goes back up all the way through your legs. So I know that I got injured in this occurrence. I got injured when I went rock climbing as well, because I did not get injured by falling. I got injured because I just pushed my body too far, further past the point of where my body would tell me stop. So I really think that this is due to a disconnect with my tertiary function introverted sensing, which would be your inferior function.
Mm-hmm.
And I genuinely believe that the more tuned in you are to this function, the less likely you are to get injured. Now, the thing is, it's also boring. It's boring not because there's not much stimulation. I think it's boring because in a way, it's exhausting for us as NPs to focus on what is going on in our body. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes so much effort where, in comparison, having new ideas come up is just really natural that we decide to focus on what is more enjoyable, more natural. I don't remember what was your specific question, Tom, when it comes to sports, though. If I would like to address the specific question that you asked, and I forgot it.
My preferred way of running was with a partner and speaking.
Yeah, which tunes in naturally to I mean, I would see it as your dominant function. You're
Yes.
just going well with different ideas and just exchanging ideas, maybe also using having introverted function, your introverted feeling function, being here to also get to know people more. I mean, that's how I see it. I think it's also a lot about being who you are and being interested in who other people are. And I think it would feed both of your dominant functions, or both your two first functions, to
Yes.
have deep conversations. You would still want to go running because it feeds for your sensing, but you would not focus on it. It would more happen in the background.
I see. Oh, that's very helpful. Now I can see how it was that I became injured running once as well because I was not paying attention to the physical part, my body or the sensation of running. I was paying attention to the person and the development of whatever the concept was. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Well, a pleasure, Tom.
Fascinating conversation. I love your depth and knowledge of this topic.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you so
for that.
much, Tom.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
I'm going to jump off now to get ready
Yeah.
for the next one.
Pleasure.
But thank you. I look forward to seeing you again someday.
Likewise.
Bye-bye. Save the chat first.
Before we jump to the next session, I just wanted to let you know that since I have the book that Stephen mentioned, Le Bug Humain in ebook format, I asked Gemini, my favorite AI, to summarize it in English, and I put in the chat the PDF file, so it's like a 2-pager, but you have at least the key concept from the book in English.
Oh,
so
thank
it's
you.
somewhere in the chat. Just need to scroll up in the chat, and you'll find the file.
Thank you, Lionel.
Thank
And
you very much, Lionel.
I want to add that the author is a searcher in neuroscience. So he has a PhD in neuroscience, and that's what I liked about it. It really gives practical insight on what's going on in our mind, seen with data, because I'm an engineer, so I like the data. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today, and see you around.
So I'm going to close this session, and in a few seconds, the next one will be open. So meet you again there for those who will follow the sessions. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Stephen. It was really great, fascinating, and sharing your personal experience really made us understand. I mean, to make links with the theory. And so
Awesome.
you walked us on the territory, so we could even forget the maps.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Lionel.
Stephen, I felt like you make a understanding the self like a profession, like understanding yourself, like as a
It's a
profession.
full-time job, yeah.
Yeah. It's what I cannot stop doing. It's
Yeah.
my leading function. I just cannot stop it. This quest for identity just won't stop. But I love it.
Yeah. And I feel like you know how you're talking about when some car is about to run you over, and then you feel this like emotion, like you usually feel like this emotional reaction, like hey, but then it gets kind of through self-learning, it kind of blunted, right? So that kind of sounds like how I normally am, as an extroverted feeler, not so aware of my introverted feeling. So it's interesting that through understanding yourself, your introverted feeling has become more numb in a good way, if that makes sense. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't have as much power over you.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say like it goes numb, to be precise. I would more say that it translates. Like it's raw, it comes from the FI, and then it moves down to the SI, which translates it and transforms it. So I like to see this raw feeling being the prima materia that then goes through the different stages of alchemy. And it's only through going through my sensations that it can become something greater and more reflexive, more useful than just being stuck in the feeling. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, like I mean, like for example, introverted thinking will introverted thinking is putting words onto always trying to terminologize something. So perhaps like there's that, of course, that primal reaction, and then you feel it in your feelings, and then like maybe like if that makes sense. Like, oh, there's my feelings happening, something like that.
I'm not sure I got your question though. I understood what you said, but I don't know where you're going at.
It wasn't a question that I
Okay.
had. I was just saying, I was just making an observation between you and me.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing, Hami.
Thank you. Thank you, Lionel.
Thank you, Lionel.